So the Browns hired Duce Staley as their running backs coach. We're going to break this down in detail, but right off the bat, I just want to say I like this hire. I think this is a good addition to the Browns coaching staff. Kevin Stefanski moved on from Stump Mitchell for maybe more than just one reason a week ago, and I know there was a whole hullabaloo about him doing an interview with Cameron Justice for some people. I didn't have much of an issue with it, but that's aside from this point. Let's talk about Duce Staley, as Josina Anderson was the first one to report the news that Duce Staley had the option of going to the Jets or the Browns, it sounds like, and ultimately he picked Cleveland, which does make you wonder when the Browns sat down with Duce Staley. And if I'm Duce Staley, and I'm meeting with the Browns and the Jets, and I'm just thinking about the running backs for a moment. I got Breece Hall in New York, and I've got an unknown with Nick Chubb in Cleveland. Maybe they told Duce Staley a little bit more color to the picture as to when Nick Chubb could return, and that might have swayed him over to the Browns. I could be making something out of nothing here, but just something to think about. But like I said, I'm a big fan of this hire. I know that position coaches, it's hard to, stand up and pound your chest over, but I think Duce Staley is a really good addition for the Browns. The Carolina Panthers, his most recent stop in the NFL, were an absolute dumpster fire in 2023. But if they did have one good quality to them, it was their running back room and overall their ground game in general. So let's give credit to Duce Staley for at least finding some sort of positive with the 2023 Carolina Panthers. I'm going to tell you more about why I like this Duce Staley hire in just a second. But quick self-plug here. Make sure to subscribe to the channel if you're not already. We are at 33,158 subscribers, which for those of you that have been subscribed for a long time, it's crazy to see how big this channel has gotten. But I don't want to slow down anytime soon, so help us reach 33,200 subscribers. Now, let's talk about what Duce Staley needs to do as the Browns running backs coach. Step one is come up with a better plan B. Plan A is give Nick Chubb the ball 20 times a game. That's a really good plan. I could be the running back coach and come up with that plan. But Stump Mitchell was tested this year. What's your plan if Nick Chubb goes down? And that's not an easy thing to handle. And not many coaches do have a good plan for that. I remember one time a reporter asked the Indianapolis Colts offensive coordinator, so I noticed that Peyton Manning gets all the first team reps. This was years ago, obviously. And we just want to know, do you have a backup plan in case Peyton Manning were to get injured? And he was like, backup plan? If 18 gets injured, we're fucked. We don't practice fucked. And that's kind of what happened to the Browns this year. If Nick Chubb goes down, we're screwed. We don't practice screwed. Well, they probably should have had some better plan in place because adding Kareem Hunt helped with goal line touches, but they never really got a whole lot going in between the 20-yard lines on the field. Now, hopefully Nick Chubb comes back to near full health. It's really hard to say what he's going to look like in 2024. I don't think anyone outside of Chubb, the team doctors, Barry, Stefanski, DePodesta, and the Haslams probably have a good idea of what to expect out of Chubb. It's also January. We don't play football until September. A lot can change between now and then. But after Nick Chubb, Duce Staley has to come up with a plan in place of if you don't have Chubb for maybe the beginning of the season, or you don't have Chubb near 100%, what's your plan? Like, tell us what you would do with Jerome Ford, Pierre Strong Jr., who you might think could be a worthy free agent addition, who in the draft would you want to see come into Cleveland? Like, I think that's the kind of plan Duce Staley has to come up with. And Duce Staley with the Carolina Panthers last year, he had a pretty good idea of what to do because the Panthers offense ranked dead last in total yards, dead last in passing yards, but 20th in rushing yards. And they didn't have some premier rusher, right? They signed Miles Sanders in the offseason. He was benched a third of the way into the season, and Chuba Hubbard took over and rushed for nearly 1,000 yards, despite not even starting at the beginning of the year. So give credit to Duce Staley because there was nothing to write home about for the 2023 Carolina Panthers, but they were able to get something going on the ground more often than not, especially when the opposing defenses know they can't pass for shit. We just got to stop the run. And despite that hurdle, they were able to rank, I think, a respectable 20th in the NFL. Now, some more background information on Staley, by the way. He was the assistant head coach and running back coach last year for Carolina. He spent 2 seasons in the Motor City before that with the Lions in the same role. And then for nearly a decade before that, he was with the Philadelphia Eagles. That's where he started his NFL career off, former third-round pick with Philly. Then he went to the Then he went to the Pittsburgh Steelers, where he unfortunately won a Super Bowl, but hopefully he can bring a Super Bowl trophy to Cleveland. So grade the hire for me. A, B, C, D, or F. You know how some people were really upset and passionate about Tommy Rees being hired? Ultimately, I don't know if a tight ends coach or a running back coach is going to be the difference maker when we get to late January and early February, but I do think putting together a good staff, that's going to help you throughout the offseason and most importantly into the season for getting some good Sundays under your belt. And then if you catch fire and get a little bit of some magic and some balls bouncing your way, who knows the rest of the history. But grade the hire, A, B, C, D, or F. Now, looking at the remaining coaching staff, Duce Staley joins this crew with Stefanski, Chad O'Shea at wide receivers, Tommy Rees at tight ends, Bill Callahan, knock on wood for now, at offensive line. I hope I don't jinx this, but I feel like with every day that passes, no news is good news for him potentially joining his son, Brian Callahan, down in Tennessee. But we still need an offensive coordinator and a quarterbacks coach because remember, AVP took over as the co-QB/OC in 2023. Now, I have more to give on this hire, and we'll talk about the running back room in general in just a moment, so don't go anywhere. But first, today's show is sponsored by Factor. Thanks to Factor, I am crushing my 2024 New Year's resolution to start cooking at home more often and start doing a better job of not dining out so often. And with Factor, you can do that without breaking the bank and also without eating unhealthy. Like choose from over 35 meals each week with keto, calorie smart, vegan, and veggie options if that's what you're looking for. Plus, they have over 55 weekly add-ons, so you have a ton of nutritious and flavorful options to kickstart your resolutions. So skip the overpriced takeout trap. Factor is cheaper and way more delicious than takeout. Get chef-crafted, restaurant-quality meals delivered right to your door. They are ready to heat and eat in just 2 minutes, which means more time for you. So head to factormeals.com/BrownsChat50 and use that same code BrownsChat50 to get 50% off. Once again, that is head to factormeals.com/BrownsChat50 and use code BrownsChat50 to get 50% off your first order. All that information, by the way, is in the comments and description of today's video. Now, let's just take a step back here and reflect on the 2023 Browns ground game. Excluding Nick Chubb for the 5-ish, 6-ish quarters he played before going down in week 2, you had Jerome Ford and Kareem Hunt primarily leading the way on the ground, and neither player really provided much of a spark. By the end of the year, Jerome Ford was not getting nearly the amount of touches he had shortly after Nick Chubb went down, and Kareem Hunt went through weird phases of getting the ball a lot and then just standing on the sideline for a whole quarter, like the Seahawks game comes to mind. But ultimately, if you think Stump Mitchell got fired because he was a media leak, maybe, maybe not. I haven't heard that, so I'm not going to say that with confidence. But I think there was an argument to be said of maybe the Browns decided we just need to bring in some new ideas and some creativity and switch things up a little bit. Because while there was a lot of good in 2023, we can't just ignore the bad. And the bad was the Browns averaged 3.3 yards a carry from week 11 to week 18. They never went over 127 yards as a team in that stretch. And they had no ground game to show for in the playoff game. So while there were a lot of good things we saw last year, and I love those things, we also need to acknowledge that if you're not moving forward, you're moving backwards. You can't just stay still in the NFL, right? You got to always strive to be better. And look at last offseason as an example. Like, yes, the Joe Woods fire was obvious. But did anyone have Mike Prefer getting canned on their bingo card? No. Was he bad? He was fine. But you could do a lot better, and they sure did with Bubba Ventrone. And I think the Browns, while I will always love Stump Mitchell's beard, I think the Browns are getting an improvement here with Duce Staley. Now, speaking of the Browns' ground game here, if Nick Chubb does not bring positive rehab results back over the next couple of weeks and months going into the draft, Cleveland very well could be looking to draft a running back. And Unfortunately for AB, this is not a good year to need a running back out of the draft. Like, Jonathan Brooks is supposedly the number one back, but he tore his ACL in November. I like Trey Benson out of Florida State a lot, but if he goes round 2 because he's just the best back of the bunch, that's way too early for the Browns to be taking a running back. So maybe keep an eye on Blake Corum from the team up north, or Lloyd out of USC, Allen from Wisconsin. Just some names to keep an eye on. As for free agency, let's say the Browns are bringing Duce Staley in with a plan of, hey, we know that Nick Chubb's not going to be the Nick Chubb that we saw. And again, this is just speculation for me. I'm not saying this is fact. But if they don't think Nick Chubb can get back to that Batman status, there are some very notable free agent running backs this offseason. Derrick Henry, Josh Jacobs. What about Tony Pollard coming in with Nick Chubb as an RB1 and RB2 tandem? Saquon Barkley, Austin Ekeler. He's only 28 years old. I think he still has some good years left. DeAndre Swift is someone I think the Browns might look back and wish they pulled the trigger on a trade for during the draft when Detroit drafted Jahmyr Gibbs and the Eagles landed DeAndre Swift 2 days later. Devin Singletary was awesome for the Texans this year. So just some names to keep an eye on right there. Again, nothing is concrete in terms of the Browns are going to be going this direction. We are definitely in a holding pattern in terms of waiting to get an idea of how Nick Chubb's rehab is going. So fingers crossed that he will, just act like the whole thing never happened. I know that's just really wishful thinking, but that's all we have right now. It's January. At this point, it's just speculation, and it's just knocking on wood and hoping and praying that Chubb can get back to that number one status. But if he cannot, you need to have a good plan B in place. And that was Stump Mitchell's, I wouldn't say downfall necessarily, but that was a big nail in the coffin. And Duce Staley comes in here knowing he's got to have a better plan B than what the Browns had in 2023. Now, before we get on out of here, I've got a random question to ask everyone. Who was the Browns running back when you first became a fan? We've asked this question before, but for quarterback, now I want to know who the running back was when you first became a fan. Was it Trent Richardson? Was it a little bit older than that? A little Peyton Hillis action maybe? Let me know who the running back was when you first became a fan. All right. Pick a card time to wrap up the show. I thought maybe you guys can agree or disagree. That was a pretty well executed video by the new guy, Cullen Brown, who is just killing it on the buttons in his first 2-3 weeks here on the job. Cullen, which card do you want to go with?
You know what? I'm going to mix it up today. I'm going to go Jack of Hearts.
Jack of Hearts? Okay. For Duce, I'm going to go 2. 2 of Hearts. 2 of Hearts. That feels appropriate. Are we ready? One more cut?
Let's do it.
I was going to say this number. 6 of Hearts. Because I did this like 2 days ago where I was like, Nick Chubb, 2 + 4, 6. 6
right
of Hearts.
suit.
Okay. I was in the right neck of the woods. That's going to do it for us on today's show. Duce Staley hired as the Browns running backs coach. We'll keep you guys updated on the remaining coaching search throughout the week.